5:07 a.m. Saturday, March 26th, 2020. A lot of interesting things going on in the world, for sure. Things yet to be revealed to me or anyone else. Things known by some. Things just going on. Maybe some other people don't notice. Had the one of the assistant managers said something about, man, I bet thinking about it, you guys do come across a lot of weirdos. And I said, yeah, delivering pizza, you see a lot of weirdos. There's a lot of cool people too, but there's definitely weirdos out there. And then driving cab, you see the rest of the weirdos. There's more than you think. Yeah, it's just been interesting times at work. Last week and before that, for a little bit, excuse me, a little bit there, real gravy train, real gravy train. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And it turned out that there was a local Facebook group for the town. And on this gossip group, the ex significant other of a guy that works at the store was putting him on blast because he just had a thing with a plea deal to avoid going to trial on an accusation made by her stepdaughter that is not nearly as severe or acute. And I'm not saying this to minimize if anything did happen, because I honestly don't know either way. But it is nonetheless disturbing and not okay if what was alleged was done. Because it is kind of a grooming habit. And that's not cool. So, dude hasn't really been there. He's got another job. This is kind of his fallback, and he ain't been there. But this person put him on blast and put a picture of him in his work uniform, like, this is who I'm talking about. And it turned out that our manager had to get a hold of the operator of that group and say, hey, you got to get rid of that post, or there can be legal consequences from my boss. And so that was taken care of. We had a dismal couple of days, almost a week, where nobody there was making money, and old boy wasn't even working. He hasn't been clear to drive. So, a bunch of people got screwed because of somebody else's vendetta. Maybe there's a lesson in that. I don't know. Still in the fog of war. Still nothing for real certain. I do know one thing. There is a flag that contains a glyph that I believe is based on a griffin or something that was yet another Nazi symbol co-opted by Ukraine into their national flag. I've seen one of these flags flying at half staff with an American flag above it. I don't know why everything's at half staff. I haven't looked into it. I don't know why everything's at half staff. But everything's at half staff right now. And I seen this flag and I seen this glyph and I was like, true disappointment in people. I don't care about the Ukraine thing. I don't care about Russia like that. Where I'm coming from is I am a third generation American. My great grandparents were born in Germany in around 1901. I think great grandpa Milton was probably actually born like 1898 or something. They were born at the turn of the century in Germany, and World War I happened, and they, with their families, got out. I believe 1911 was when they came to America. By the 1940s, my mom's dad, his uncle, my dad's stepdad, in modern times, much later life, but who would become my dad's stepdad, and as well as I believe my dad's dad, all fought in World War II against the Nazis. First generation Germans, except for my dad's dad. He was would have been a second generation Scots-Ire American. My ancestors fought the Nazis. And I'm not punch a Nazi, punch a Nazi. I'm not like that. But it's not okay. And to find out that there's a country where they basically have some sick, fucking abstract, fetishized version of it that for whatever reason has been just allowed to fester and pervade. And the corrupt establishment, military industrial, fiat currency, market manipulation, resource monopoly, establishment system thing, whatever you want to call it, of the world, the way most or all countries seem to be run through, are backing that group because it serves their political purpose somewhere else. Now, what does the word sympathizer mean? And the problem is when someone doesn't realize that's what they're doing. Can you imagine accidentally, in solidarity though, you meant well, flying that red flag with the white circle and the black swastika in the middle of it, underneath your American flag while hanging at a half-staff in honor of something going on in Ukraine? I mean, just because they don't use that symbol, that was the only symbol that most people seem to think when they think Nazi. And I'm not an expert. I haven't super studied up on this. But yes, they were into the occult. They used a ton of symbolism. They had regiments, orders. Each different group was its own little enclave of pride. And they had their own symbols for each of their own. And this is a pervasive thing. These symbols are, to this day, in use. Now, there was something that I had mentioned on a follow-up video that I opted not to upload because I realized that there was more to this coming in, and I was like, I have spoke too soon. So I didn't say nothing after the follow-up to the video about emotions. I have looked into a little bit of that judge for Supreme Court. That's an excessively lenient case. That what ended up happening was actually, without mentioning, I believe in those instances, those individuals turned white hat and started working for the government. Because the individual with the 3-month sentence that people are talking about, the example that was brought up in Congress, his current employment on what is that site, LinkedIn or whatever? The guy's got a LinkedIn. And it's been looked into, and he appears to be working in infotech, which is to say a person who is convicted of online acquisition and distribution of that kind of porn. I'm gonna not say it for my own channel's sake. Censorship sucks, but that's how it is. You know what I'm talking about. A person who was convicted, tried and convicted of transacting that stuff. Receiving and sending. Not necessarily creating, but still, it's serious. There was a lot. Was given 3 months. And then at some point later was remanded to a halfway house for 6 months. Like he was reoffended back into the system, is the term. And now works in IT, infotech, online, for the government. He works for the federal government as a contractor in infotech. That means that his reduced sentence may have also been because he became a confidential informant without telling anyone. Now that his name is out there, that guy can't do what he does for the government. If he actually does anything functional and not actually that opposite thing that they all seem to be doing, which is where they tell you everything is for your best interest, and meanwhile they're stabbing you in the back, literally, with a knife. And you're like, yo, you're stabbing me in the back. They're like, no, I'm not. I'm helping you. I'm helping you. I'm not stabbing you. Anyways. Like I say, can you imagine accidentally, with good intentions, flying a Nazi flag, the red one? I mean, everybody sees that, and all these different battalions, regiments, each of them had their own name, their own designation with some kind of a symbolic thing. Remember, Hugo Boss did all the stuff. All the uniforms and everything, the patches, that was done by a top-level global designer who happened to be German. They had all these designs and all these things, and now people are using them. I can't get behind that. I refuse to get behind that. My ancestors fought against that. I refuse to get behind that. I don't care what anyone thinks, what anyone says, whatever impression of me that gives to others. And no, I'm not all pro-Russia. Putin's like a wolf. You gotta be respectful. But you don't want to feed it. So that situation is real funky. And it's their money laundering country. And all that other stuff that I've already talked about. That all still needs addressed. That's why there was the video about the rule of law and the consent of the governed. So, on a lighter note to end this video, I noticed two things happening at the same time. And if this is one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to claim that there's a pattern. There's no sane way to make a claim that there is any kind of organization or planning behind, organization like the ACT, not like a group, behind anything like this. But in the category of my life, when I'm trying to do something, and then something else, somebody else's bullshit just makes it that much more difficult. Kind of like how the gas prices keep going up and I have to drive for my job. If I want to make any kind of money, I have to be able to drive, which means I have to be able to afford the gas. And as more gas gets more expensive, I have to rely more and more on tips and less on what I can get for the mileage compensation. And if people with their own hyperinflation issues are not tipping, then I don't have the means to continue doing the job. And now that's extreme for me with the truck, but the other drivers with the better equipped cars to handle the gas mileage and make a little bit more will only last a smidge longer before they get to the point that they're really not making enough money for it to be viable. And then you don't have anyone. Or you start going real high turnover, which means a bunch of people that you may or may not even get your food, depends on whether they decide to stay on the job or not. Or it turns into some kind of DoorDash thing where the citizenry can opt to be delivery drivers because they ain't got drivers. So Domino's has this ad, and this ad is twofold. The first part, they begun with a deal that they ran for a while, which is that you get a carry-out special, and they say, and we're giving you a coupon for $3 off your next order. And they call it a tip. They say, here's a $3 tip for you. You came in and got it. You were your own delivery driver. You deserve a tip because every driver deserves a tip. Everyone deserves a tip, they say, on these ads. And so you go on the app and you do the carry-out thing, and of course then they remind you that you can tip on that too. And so then, like, because when you go through the app, they remind you that you can tip. People are being prodded. People are being asked, would you like to hook up your driver? And some people choose not to. Other people only give you the coin. And it's like, yeah, I appreciate being able to add coin into my jar, but I'm not the only one there right now that is on the verge of just handing that change back and being like, no, that's an insult. You can have it. In other places, other ways, there are people that are being very generous. Um, it kind of evens out, but it's really not fair to the people that are being generous to have to cut their, if they're like, yeah, I'm going to give them 40% because I had a good day and here's the money and boom, we'll give them 40. Their 40 then averages down to three people that, didn't tip at all. Their zeros, they bring that down. And pretty soon these people are tipping 40. They're really tipping, 10, 15, so that all the other people can have tipped 5 that didn't tip by average or whatever. I think that's unfair to the people that are being generous. The other people should also carry their weight. And when it comes to that, I've been over it before. I've spoken on this before. I'm not advocating wage changes. I'm not advocating at this time even a mandatory gratuity. But I see these things coming because the only reason Domino's would do ads like this is that a lot of their stores are having difficulty keeping drivers because people are not tipping. People are not making it worth their drivers' while. And realistically, the store overhead cost to translate to a significant pay increase for the drivers also translates into a gargantuan price increase for customers. One that the customers would not like. So then the whole thing would fail. And it would contribute to inflation because it would mean higher wages, higher prices. Your buying power goes down. Your own buying power in the company goes down. So the solution is gratuity. Even if it ends up coming to mandatory gratuity as opposed to a pay raise. That is better than a pay raise. So the insult of chump change is possibly going to be handed back now. I'm really thinking about this. I'm just being like, nope, I insist. There you go. Because if you legitimately think that like 60 cents or 35 cents or 10 cents or 2 pennies is sufficient gratuity for a person who is effectively a waiter using their own personal vehicle to bring you what you ordered, and especially if they do so in a timely fashion with good conduct and courtesy and also everything that you ordered as you ordered it. Now then, the second part of the advertising bit is one that specifically says something to the effect of don't forget to tip your driver. Oh man, I did forget to tip. Oh crap. How can I? Well, here, you can do it on the app. Here's how. It's like, oh yeah, see? Now there's no excuse. There's no way to say, oh, feigning ignorance. I didn't know. No. Everybody knows. Pretty much, I don't think you can't know. And if you don't know how, that's different. You can Google, how do I tip appropriately? What is an appropriate tip in 2022? The answer to that is 20%. If you're tipping 20%, that's a decent tip, assuming your service is going to be pretty all right. And if it's even better, then by all means, go even better. People right now are tipping about 15% on average, and they think they're doing good. And I just don't have the heart to tell anyone that it's like that was 10 years ago's acceptable, figuring it's going to be all right tip, which 20 years ago was 10%. Cost of living increases. Wages do not necessarily increase. Cost of product increases, which means over time, not only does your percentage, the amount that you're doing increase, but if it does not correspond to the inflation, then it's really not enough. And it is a luxury. a convenience to be waited upon at your doorstep with food that someone else made somewhere else and brought to you that you wanted. Like that's luxury. That's convenience. That's very first world. Simultaneous to this advertising campaign, there was some sort of an opinion piece in I don't know whether it was an academic journal of some sort of some university, or if this was on one of the papers of record, but it was effectively an opinion piece arguing that having to tip is slavery because during Jim Crow times and such, the inability to tip made you an obvious pariah, and it was used to degrade people. The reality is, any link to slavery is more like, and even more pronouncedly as a cab driver than as pizza delivery. Anytime someone orders and you're driving to them and all this other whatever, and they don't tip, you're potentially paying money in gas to take them their food because you're not receiving adequate compensation, because that's just how it works. And with driving cab, it was even worse because it was 30% of the cut rate that they had. And nobody was tipping, so there was no extra gratuity, which means that my 20-minute time with you in the vehicle as I take you one or two places nets me about $3.50. But I don't necessarily get that much every 20 minutes to equal $9 an hour. The actual cut would end up coming to about $5, maybe $6, on a really good day, $6.50 an hour, including tips. That was terrible. And it was damn near slavery, because the only people who will drive cab are the ones who really have nowhere else to go and they have to get some kind of money. They're not interested in selling themselves, speaking of slavery, or, doing things that really break the law to get that money. Some people just don't have that in them. And the people who run it take full advantage of that too. So, the idea that tipping is being a slave is just a bullshit, made-up, woke excuse to be a cheapskate and perpetuate negative stereotypes about racism at the same time. And the final word is this, the thing that I was remembering and reminded of that I've now come around on. There is more slavery in the world now than there has ever been. Not only because there are more people, but because there are more slaves alive and enslaved now than at any prior point in human history. And the same people who are chanting about Ukraine, who were previously chanting about anybody but Trump, previously to that, I'm with her, right? Her was Secretary of State under the previous president before that. And her helped destabilize like 4 African countries, basically destabilize their economies, neutralize their leaders and their governments. In those countries, slave trades arose where previously there were not. There are more slaves now than at any time in the past. Weird, huh?